It was an ordinary Tuesday, or so I thought. The day started like any other. Early morning coffee, the familiar hustle of getting ready for work, and the usual commute through the bustling streets of Chicago. I had a late meeting at the office that got canceled last minute, which meant I could head home early, a rare treat. Little did I know, this unexpected return would unravel my life as I knew it. I parked my car in the driveway, noticing that my wife, Jenna's car, was already there. Odd, I thought. She usually stayed late at the school where she worked as a teacher. I shrugged it off, thinking maybe she had a rough day, and decided to come home early as well. The moment I stepped through the front door, I sensed something was off. The house was eerily quiet, except for the faint sound of laughter coming from upstairs. My heart raced as I crept up the stairs, the laughter growing louder with each step. It was Jenna's voice, unmistakable, but mixed with another man's deep chuckle. My hands trembled as I reached for the bedroom door handle. I pushed it open, and there they were, Jenna and a man, tangled in the sheets of our bed. For a second, the world stood still. My mind refused to process the scene in front of me. Jenna, my loving wife of 10 years, was in the arms of another man. "Mark, what the hell are you doing here?" Jenna's voice snapped me back to reality. She scrambled to cover herself, while the man, her colleague John, if I remembered correctly, grabbed his clothes and made a hasty exit through the window, not even daring to face me. Anger and betrayal surged through me. "How long has this been going on, Jenna?" I demanded, my voice shaking with fury. Her eyes were wide with fear and guilt. "Mark, please, it's not what it looks like." "Not what it looks like?" I interrupted, my voice rising. "I've just caught you in bed with another man and you tell me it's not what it looks like?" Tears welled up in her eyes, but I felt no sympathy. I was too blinded by the pain and rage consuming me. "How long?" I repeated, my voice now cold and steady. 3 years, she whispered, her voice barely audible. 3 years. The words echoed in my mind, each repetition a hammer striking at the foundation of our marriage. 3 years of lies, deceit, and betrayal. I couldn't take it anymore. I turned and left the room, her pleas for forgiveness falling on deaf ears. Downstairs, I collapsed onto the couch, trying to make sense of the whirlwind of emotions tearing me apart. The love of my life had been unfaithful, and not just once, but for 3 long years. My mind raced, alternating between memories of happier times and the devastating image of Jenna with another man. As the initial shock began to wear off, a dark thought took root in my mind. I couldn't just walk away from this. Jenna had torn apart our marriage and destroyed my trust. She needed to pay for what she'd done. I needed revenge, not out of spite, but to reclaim my dignity and ensure she understood the gravity of her actions. And so, as the sun set on what was undoubtedly the worst day of my life, a plan began to form. Jenna thought she had me figured out, but she had no idea what I was capable of. This wasn't the end of my story. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. One where I would take control and make sure Jenna and her lover faced the consequences of their actions. The next morning, I awoke on the couch, my body stiff, and my mind clouded by the events of the previous day. The house was still, and for a moment, I wondered if it had all been a terrible dream. But the crumpled sheets on our bed, the discarded clothes, and the lingering scent of betrayal told me otherwise. Jenna was in the kitchen, a look of tentative hope on her face as she saw me. "Mark, please, we need to talk," she said softly, her voice filled with a mix of regret and desperation. I couldn't hold back any longer. The anger and pain that had simmered overnight erupted in a torrent of emotion. "Talk? Talk about what, Jenna? About how you've been lying to me for 3 years? About how you've been sneaking around with that man?" My voice was loud and unrestrained, echoing off the walls. She flinched at my words, tears streaming down her face. "I'm sorry, Mark. I never meant for it to happen. It just did." I laughed bitterly. "It just did? Affairs don't just happen, Jenna. You made a choice. Every time you met him, every time you lied to me, you chose this. You chose to destroy our marriage." Her sobs grew louder, but my heart was too hardened to feel any compassion. "I know I hurt you, Mark, but please, we can work through this. We can go to counseling. We can—" "Counseling?" I interrupted, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You think sitting in a room with a stranger is going to fix this? Fix what you did?" She reached out to touch me, but I recoiled. The thought of her touch now repulsive. "Don't," I said coldly. "Don't even think about it." Her face crumpled, and she collapsed onto a chair, her body racked with sobs. For a moment, I almost felt a pang of guilt. But then the image of her and John flashed through my mind, and any sympathy I might have felt vanished. "You need to leave," I said, my voice firm. "I need time to think, time to decide what to do next." She looked up, her eyes wide with fear. "Leave? But where will I go?" "That's not my problem," I replied. "You should have thought about that before you decided to destroy our life together." Jenna stood slowly, her shoulders slumped in defeat. "I'll stay with my sister," she murmured. "But please, Mark, let's not make any rash decisions. We've been together for so long. We can find a way to get through this." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Watching her gather her things and leave was both a relief and a heartache. This was the woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with, and yet she had betrayed me in the worst possible way. Once she was gone, the house felt eerily quiet. The silence was deafening, filled with the echoes of our shattered marriage. I wandered through the rooms, each one holding memories now tainted by her infidelity. I found myself in the bedroom, standing by the bed where it had all come crashing down. The anger flared again, and in a fit of rage, I tore the sheets off the bed, threw pillows against the wall, and overturned the nightstand. Anything to vent the fury that was consuming me. When I finally collapsed onto the floor, exhausted and spent, I knew that simply leaving her wasn't enough. Jenna had to understand the pain she had caused, and John needed to face the consequences of his actions. My thoughts turned dark, and a plan began to take shape. Revenge wasn't just about making them suffer. It was about reclaiming my dignity and ensuring they both understood the gravity of their betrayal. I would make sure they paid for what they had done. And so, as I sat in the wreckage of our bedroom, a cold determination settled over me. This was just the beginning. Jenna and John would rue the day they crossed me. In the days that followed Jenna's departure, I buried myself in the mundane details of life, trying to distract myself from the gaping wound her betrayal had left. But no matter how hard I tried, the image of her with John lingered, a constant reminder of the life I had lost. Determined not to let this consume me, I decided to channel my anger into something productive. I needed to know everything about their affair, every lie, every secret meeting, every whispered promise. If I was going to confront this, I needed all the facts. And so, my investigation began. I started with the basics, trawling through Jenna's phone records and emails. It was painful, each discovery like a fresh stab to the heart, but I pressed on, driven by a need for the truth. Her messages to John were filled with the kind of intimacy and affection that once defined our relationship. Each word felt like a betrayal, each emoji a reminder of her duplicity. Their correspondence painted a clear picture. They had been meeting regularly, often at his place or during school breaks. The affair had started innocently enough, with casual flirtations and shared lunches, but had quickly escalated into something much deeper. I discovered that John was not just her colleague, but also her confidant and partner in crime, sharing in their deceitful dance. With a clearer understanding of their relationship, I needed more concrete evidence. I installed discrete cameras around the house, ensuring they were well hidden and capturing everything. I also hired a private investigator, an old friend from college who owed me a favor. His job was to follow John and document his every move, especially when he was with Jenna. Days turned into weeks, and slowly but surely, the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. The cameras captured Jenna's visits to our house when I wasn't home, and her desperate attempts to retrieve anything incriminating. Each visit was recorded, each moment a testament to her guilt. The investigator, Mike, provided me with a wealth of information about John. He had a string of affairs behind him, each one more sordid than the last. He was known for preying on vulnerable women, manipulating them into his web of deceit. Jenna was just another conquest for him, a notch on his belt. One evening, Mike handed me a folder filled with photos and documents. "Here's everything you need," he said, his voice filled with pity. "I'm sorry it had to come to this, Mark." I nodded, unable to find the words to thank him. The folder was heavy in my hands, a tangible representation of the weight of their betrayal. I spent hours poring over the contents, each photo, each document, adding fuel to the fire of my resolve. As I pieced together the timeline of their affair, a plan began to take shape in my mind. Jenna and John thought they could get away with this, that their secrets would remain buried. But they were wrong. I would expose them, both to their colleagues and to the world. They needed to face the consequences of their actions, and I was going to make sure of it. With the evidence I had gathered, I felt a grim satisfaction. This was no longer about my pain or my broken heart. It was about justice. Jenna and John had chosen to betray me, and now they would pay the price. The first step was complete. I had the proof I needed. Now, it was time to put my plan into action. The days ahead would be challenging, but I was ready. Each step of my plan was carefully thought out, every detail meticulously planned. Jenna and John had underestimated me, but they were about to learn just how far I was willing to go to reclaim my life and my dignity. The storm was coming, and they would not escape its wrath. The days of gathering evidence morphed into nights of restless planning. Every detail had to be perfect. I couldn't afford any mistakes. The anger that once clouded my mind had crystallized into a sharp focus, and I was ready to take the next step: legal preparations. The first thing I did was find a reputable divorce attorney, someone experienced and ruthless. After thorough research and recommendations, I settled on Jennifer Reed. Known for her tenacity and impeccable record, she was exactly who I needed on my side. I scheduled an appointment, and a few days later, I walked into her office. Jennifer greeted me with a firm handshake and a determined look in her eyes. "Mark, I've reviewed the basic details you provided. This isn't just about a divorce, is it?" I nodded. "It's about making sure Jenna and John face the consequences of their actions. I have evidence of her affair, and I want to make sure it works to my advantage." Jennifer leaned back in her chair, considering. Infidelity can certainly play a role in divorce proceedings, especially when it comes to alimony and division of assets. "Let's go through what you have." I handed over the folder filled with photos, messages, and reports. Jennifer's eyes scanned the contents, her expression hardening with each passing moment. "This is quite comprehensive. You've done your homework." "Every piece of evidence is time-stamped and documented," I said. "I want to ensure she doesn't get a penny more than she deserves." Jennifer nodded. "We can use this to our advantage. First, we'll file for divorce on grounds of adultery. This will set the tone for the proceedings and make it clear that we're not playing around." As we discussed the details, Jennifer outlined the steps we would take. She would draft the divorce petition, citing Jenna's infidelity and including the evidence I had gathered. We would also request a forensic accountant to review our finances, ensuring Jenna couldn't hide any assets. "One more thing," Jennifer said, her eyes piercing. "We need to handle the property division strategically. You need to protect your assets and ensure she doesn't walk away with more than she should." I nodded, feeling a sense of relief. With Jennifer on my side, I knew I had a fighting chance. "What about her job? I've started spreading rumors about her affair at the school. I want her to face professional consequences as well." Jennifer's expression turned cautious. "Be careful with that, Mark. While we want to expose her actions, we need to ensure everything we do is legal and ethical. Focus on the divorce for now. Once that's settled, we can consider other actions." Her words made sense. I had to stay focused and not let my anger drive me to reckless decisions. "You're right. Let's concentrate on the divorce." With a plan in place, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. Jennifer assured me she would handle the legal proceedings meticulously, ensuring every detail was covered. I left her office that day with a clear understanding of the next steps and a sense of control over the situation. Over the following weeks, Jennifer worked tirelessly. The divorce petition was filed, and Jenna was served the papers. The shock and betrayal in her eyes when she received them were satisfying, but I knew the battle had just begun. The forensic accountant began his review, uncovering hidden accounts and financial discrepancies that Jenna had tried to conceal. Each discovery strengthened our case, making it clear that Jenna's deceit extended beyond her infidelity. Meanwhile, I continued to gather information and prepare for the inevitable confrontation. I contacted friends and family, carefully crafting the narrative to ensure they knew the truth. The support I received was overwhelming, reaffirming my resolve to see this through to the end. As the legal preparations advanced, I felt a sense of empowerment. This was no longer about vengeance alone. It was about reclaiming my life and ensuring justice was served. Jenna and John had made their choices, and now they would face the consequences. The foundation was set, the pieces in place. The legal battle was just beginning, and I was ready for the fight. With Jennifer by my side and the evidence on my side, I knew I had a strong case. It was time to take back control and ensure that Jenna's betrayal did not go unpunished. With the legal wheels in motion, I turned my attention to maintaining a facade of normalcy. I needed to play my part as the devoted husband in public, ensuring no one suspected the turmoil that was brewing beneath the surface. This way, when the time came to reveal Jenna's betrayal, it would hit harder, and her fall from grace would be complete. The first step was to reconnect with our social circle. Jenna and I had always been seen as the perfect couple, attending parties, hosting dinners, and socializing with friends. I needed to re-establish this image, not only to gather support, but also to gather more information. I reached out to our closest friends, organizing a small get-together at our house. It was the first social event since the discovery of her affair, and I wanted to ensure everything appeared as normal as possible. I sent Jenna a message, asking her to come home for the evening to maintain appearances. She arrived just before our guests, her eyes red from crying. "Mark, are you sure about this?" she asked, her voice trembling. I forced a smile, masking the disdain I felt. "Yes, Jenna. We need to show everyone that we're still a united front. It's important for us, for now." Our friends arrived, and the evening began with laughter and light conversation. Jenna played her part well, smiling and engaging with everyone, while I kept a watchful eye, noting every interaction, every slip in her facade. As the night progressed, I subtly guided the conversation toward relationships and fidelity, planting seeds of doubt and suspicion. "Isn't it strange how some people can lead double lives?" I said, feigning casual interest. "You think you know someone, but they turn out to be completely different." Our friends nodded, sharing their own stories and opinions. I could see Jenna growing increasingly uncomfortable, but she maintained her composure, laughing and contributing to the conversation. After the guests left, Jenna turned to me, her eyes filled with anger and hurt. "What was that all about, Mark? Are you trying to humiliate me?" I shrugged, my voice cold. "Just making conversation, Jenna. People find it fascinating how others can deceive so easily." She looked at me, her expression a mix of fear and realization. "You're not going to let this go, are you?" "Not a chance," I replied, my voice steady. "You brought this on yourself." The days that followed were a delicate balancing act. I continued to play the role of the loving husband in public while secretly gathering more information and laying the groundwork for Jenna's downfall. I attended school events with her, smiling and chatting with her colleagues, all the while knowing that soon their opinions of her would change drastically. I also reached out to a few trusted friends, subtly sharing my side of the story. The narrative was simple. I had discovered Jenna's betrayal, and while I was heartbroken, I was trying to salvage our marriage. The sympathy and support I received were overwhelming, strengthening my resolve. One evening, I met with Alex and Jessica, close friends who had known us for years. Over drinks, I carefully steered the conversation towards Jenna and John's affair. "Can you believe it?" I said, my voice low and filled with feigned vulnerability. "After all these years, she betrayed me with a colleague. It's been going on for 3 years. Jessica gasped, her eyes wide with shock. "Mark, I had no idea. How are you holding up?" I sighed, looking down at my drink. "It's been tough, but I need to stay strong, for myself, and to make sure she understands the gravity of what she's done." Alex shook his head, anger flashing in his eyes. "That's unforgivable, Mark. We're here for you, whatever you need." Their support was a balm to my wounded pride. I knew that when the time came to reveal everything, I would have a network of allies ready to back me up. The facade was in place, and the groundwork was laid. I was biding my time, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. Jenna thought she could escape the consequences of her actions, but she was wrong. The storm was brewing, and soon it would engulf her and John. As I lay in bed that night, the house quiet around me, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. The pieces were falling into place, and the time for retribution was drawing near. Jenna had no idea what was coming, and that was exactly how I wanted it. With the public facade in place, it was time to compile the evidence into a comprehensive dossier that would serve as the cornerstone of my plan. This dossier would not only support my case in court, but also ensure that Jenna and John faced the full extent of their actions, both personally and professionally. I spent hours meticulously organizing every piece of evidence I had gathered. The photos from the private investigator, the emails and text messages, the financial records showing Jenna's attempts to hide money. All of it was carefully documented and arranged. The dossier was a chilling testament to their betrayal and deceit. Once everything was compiled, I made multiple copies. One for my lawyer, one for the school board, and one for strategic release to friends and family when the time was right. The goal was to ensure that no matter what, Jenna and John couldn't deny or escape the truth. I called Jennifer Reed, my attorney, and set up a meeting to review the dossier. When I arrived at her office, she greeted me with a nod of approval. "You've been thorough, Mark. This is exactly what we need to solidify our case." We sat down and went through the contents together. Jennifer's eyes narrowed as she flipped through the pages, her expression growing more determined with each piece of evidence. "This will work in our favor. The court will have no choice but to see the extent of Jenna's betrayal." "Good," I replied. "I want her to understand that her actions have consequences. And John, too. He can't just walk away from this." Jennifer smiled, a hint of satisfaction in her eyes. "Trust me, Mark. With this dossier, we'll make sure they both face the repercussions. I'll handle the legal side, but what about the professional and personal aspects?" "I have a plan for that, too," I said, leaning back in my chair. "I'm going to ensure that everyone they know sees the truth." The first step was to send a copy of the dossier to the school board. Jenna and John's affair was a violation of professional ethics, and the school had strict policies against such behavior. I wanted to ensure that their workplace became aware of their actions and took appropriate measures. I drafted an anonymous letter detailing the affair and attaching copies of the evidence. It was factual, devoid of any emotional language, and focused solely on the breach of professional conduct. I mailed it to the school board, knowing that it was only a matter of time before they would be summoned for a meeting. Next, I prepared a package for our close friends and family. This one was more personal, including a letter from me explaining what had happened and why I was sharing this information. I wanted them to see Jenna and John for who they truly were, to understand the pain and betrayal I had endured. I spent a day delivering the packages, stopping by each friend's house, and ensuring they received it personally. The reactions were a mix of shock, anger, and support. Each person promised to stand by me, further solidifying the network of allies I was building. Finally, I arranged a meeting with Jenna. I wanted to confront her with the dossier, to show her the extent of what I had compiled. She needed to see that her actions had consequences, and that I wasn't going to let this go easily. We met at a neutral location, a quiet cafe where we wouldn't be disturbed. Jenna looked tired, her eyes red from crying, but I felt no sympathy. She had made her choices, and now it was time for her to face them. "Mark," she began, her voice shaky. "I don't know what else to say. I'm sorry for everything." I placed the dossier on the table between us, opening it to the first page. "Sorry isn't enough, Jenna. Look at this. Look at what you've done." Her eyes widened as she flipped through the pages, each piece of evidence more damning than the last. Tears streamed down her face, but I remained unmoved. "This is what I'm taking to court, and this is what I've shared with the school board and our friends. Everyone will know the truth." "Please, Mark," she sobbed. "Don't do this. We can find another way." "No, Jenna," I said firmly. "This is the way. You and John need to face the consequences of your actions. This isn't just about me. It's about accountability and justice." She looked defeated, her shoulders slumping as she realized the gravity of the situation. "I understand," she whispered. "I just wish things could have been different." "So do I replied, standing up to leave. "But we can't change the past. We can only deal with the present and the future, and you'll have to deal with the consequences of your betrayal." As I walked away, I felt a sense of closure. The dossier was out there, the truth was revealed, and Jenna and John would face the repercussions of their actions. It was a step towards reclaiming my life and dignity, a step towards justice. The storm had begun, and there was no turning back. With the dossier making its rounds and the initial shockwaves rippling through our social circle, it was time to execute the next phase of my plan, sabotaging Jenna's career. She had built a reputation as a respected teacher, but her actions had violated professional ethics and trust. It was only fitting that she face the consequences in her workplace as well. I began by monitoring the school board's reaction to the anonymous package I had sent. It didn't take long for the whispers to start. Teachers and staff members began to discuss the scandal in hushed tones, the details slowly leaking out. Jenna was called into a meeting with the principal and the school board to discuss the allegations. Through a contact at the school, I learned that the meeting was intense. Jenna tried to defend herself, but the evidence was overwhelming. The board decided to launch a formal investigation, putting her on administrative leave during the process. It was the first tangible consequence of her actions, and I felt a grim satisfaction knowing that her professional life was unraveling. But I wasn't done yet. I needed to ensure that this scandal stuck and that she couldn't easily recover. I reached out to a few parents I knew through the school's PTA. In casual conversations, I subtly brought up the rumors, expressing my concerns about the impact on the students and the school's reputation. Parents were understandably upset, and their outrage began to grow. Soon, parents started voicing their concerns to the school administration, demanding action. The pressure mounted, and it wasn't long before local media caught wind of the story. A reporter from a local newspaper contacted me, having heard rumors of the affair. I agreed to an anonymous interview, providing just enough details to ensure the story gained traction without revealing my identity. The article hit the stands a week later, the headline reading, "Scandal Rocks Local School, Teachers Accused of Unethical Relationship." It included quotes from concerned parents and references to the ongoing investigation. Jenna's name was mentioned, along with John's, painting a picture of a school in crisis. The public reaction was swift and brutal. Social media exploded with comments and opinions, most condemning Jenna and John for their actions. The school board faced increasing pressure to act decisively. The community's trust had been shattered, and they needed to restore it. During this time, I continued to play the role of the concerned husband, expressing my sorrow and disappointment to anyone who asked. I attended school board meetings, voicing my concerns and emphasizing the need for accountability. My presence added weight to the public outcry, further pushing the board to take action. The investigation concluded with the school board deciding to terminate Jenna's employment. John faced a similar fate, his career in ruins. Their professional lives were destroyed, their reputations in tatters. They had no choice but to leave the community in shame. One evening, as I sat in my living room, the phone rang. It was Jenna. Her voice was a mix of anger, desperation, and defeat. "Mark, how could you do this to me? You've ruined my life." I listened to her rant, feeling no sympathy. "Jenna, you ruined your own life. You made your choices, and now you're facing the consequences. This is just the beginning. You haven't even seen the full extent of what's coming." She was silent for a moment, then spoke, her voice trembling. "What more could you possibly do? You've taken everything from me." "No, Jenna," I replied coldly. "Not everything, but you'll see soon enough." I hung up, the satisfaction of her despair washing over me. Her career was in shambles, and the life she had built was crumbling. The next steps would ensure that she truly understood the depth of her betrayal and the price she had to pay. As I prepared for the next phase, I reflected on how far I had come. The journey was far from over, but with each step, I felt a sense of justice being served. Jenna had thought she could escape the consequences of her actions, but she was wrong. The storm was only beginning, and I was ready to see it through to the end. With Jenna's career in ruins and the scandal spreading through our community like wildfire, it was time to tighten the financial noose. I had always been meticulous with our finances, and now that attention to detail would serve me well. Jenna needed to be left with nothing, and I had the means to make that happen. The first step was ensuring that our joint accounts and investments were secured. I contacted our financial advisor, arranging a private meeting to discuss the necessary changes. As we sat in his office, I laid out my plan. "Jenna and I are separating," I began, watching his reaction. "I need to protect my assets and ensure she can't access any of our joint accounts." He nodded, understanding the gravity of the situation. "We'll transfer the funds to accounts solely in your name. I'll also look into any joint investments and make the necessary adjustments." "Good," I replied. "I want this done discreetly and quickly. She can't know about this until it's too late." Over the next few days, the transfers were completed. Our joint accounts were emptied and the funds moved to my accounts. I also secured our investments, ensuring that any assets tied to our names were solely under my control. Jenna would be left with nothing but the clothes on her back. Next, I tackled our real estate. We owned a few properties, including our home and a rental property downtown. I contacted a real estate lawyer, discussing the best way to transfer ownership without raising suspicion. "Mark, we can draft a quitclaim deed for the rental property," the lawyer explained. "This will transfer her interest to you. As for your home, it's more complicated. We'll need her consent for a full transfer." I nodded, considering my options. "Prepare the quitclaim deed. I'll handle getting her signature." The lawyer drafted the necessary documents, and I arranged a meeting with Jenna under the guise of discussing the divorce settlement. She arrived at the cafe looking defeated, her shoulders slumped and eyes weary. "Jenna, I want to make this process as smooth as possible," I began, sliding the documents across the table. "These are the papers to transfer the rental property to me. It's one less thing we need to worry about during the divorce." She looked at the papers, her eyes flickering with suspicion. "Why should I sign this, Mark? You're taking everything from me." I leaned in, my voice calm but firm. "You're in no position to argue, Jenna. You've lost your job and your reputation, and soon you'll lose much more. Sign the papers, and we can at least settle this part amicably." With a resigned sigh, she signed the documents, her hands trembling. I took the papers, feeling a sense of triumph. One more piece of the puzzle was in place. Back at home, I reviewed our financial situation. Jenna had no access to our funds, our properties were under my control, and her career was destroyed. But I wasn't done yet. I needed to ensure she had no way to rebuild her life easily. I reached out to creditors, informing them of our separation and requesting that any joint accounts be closed or transferred to my name. I also checked our credit reports, ensuring there were no outstanding debts or liabilities that could be used against me. Finally, I set up a meeting with our accountant to review our tax situation. "I want to make sure everything is in order," I told him. "Any joint liabilities need to be resolved, and I need to protect my assets." The accountant nodded, going through our records meticulously. "We'll file separately this year. It will minimize your liabilities and ensure she can't claim anything." As the financial warfare continued, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. Jenna had thought she could betray me and walk away unscathed, but she was wrong. Every step I took ensured she would face the consequences of her actions. One evening, as I reviewed the final stages of my plan, the phone rang. It was Mike, the private investigator. "Mark, I've got something you might be interested in. John's been seeing another woman. Thought you'd like to know." A new wave of anger surged through me. John wasn't just a betrayer, he was a serial cheater. This information could be the final nail in the coffin for both him and Jenna. "Thanks, Mike," I replied, a plan forming in my mind. This is exactly what I needed. With financial warfare underway and new ammunition against John, the next phase of my plan was ready. Jenna and John had no idea what was coming. The storm was building, and soon it would unleash its full fury on their lives. With Jenna's career and finances in shambles, it was time to move to the next phase of my plan: psychological warfare. My goal was to undermine her confidence and make her question every decision she made. I wanted her to feel the weight of her betrayal in every aspect of her life. The first step was subtle, planting seeds of doubt and insecurity in her mind. I started by sending anonymous messages, reminding her of her affair and the consequences. They were short, cryptic notes left on her car windshield, slipped into her mailbox, and even emailed from anonymous accounts. "Remember, actions have consequences. You can't escape your past. Everyone knows what you did." The effect was immediate. Jenna became increasingly paranoid, looking over her shoulder and jumping at every shadow. Her friends started noticing her erratic behavior, and soon the rumors of her mental state began to spread. Next, I began to manipulate her environment. I would move objects in the house when she wasn't there, small things like her keys or a book she was reading. She would return home to find them in different places, unsure if she had misplaced them or if someone had been in the house. This tactic played on her growing paranoia, making her feel like she was losing control. To further isolate her, I reached out to mutual friends and subtly planted doubts about her stability. "I'm really worried about Jenna," I would say. "She's been acting strangely since everything happened. I'm not sure she's coping well." The seeds I planted took root, and soon, friends began to distance themselves from her, unsure of how to deal with her erratic behavior. I also made sure to keep up appearances as the supportive ex-husband in public. Whenever we were at social events, I would play the role of the concerned partner, subtly highlighting her instability. Jenna's been through a lot, I would say, sighing heavily. I just hope she finds the help she needs. The final step was to confront John directly. Armed with the information Mike had provided about his new affair, I arranged a meeting at a quiet bar where we wouldn't be disturbed. John arrived, looking nervous and unsure of why I had contacted him. "Mark, what's this about?" he asked, his eyes darting around the room. I leaned in, my voice low and menacing. "It's about you, John, and Jenna, and everything you've done." He paled, swallowing hard. "Look, Mark, I'm sorry about what happened, but it's over now. We've both moved on." I chuckled, shaking my head. "Moved on? Do you think it's that simple? I know about your new girlfriend, John. How do you think she'll react when she finds out about your history of affairs?" John's eyes widened, and he began to stammer. "You wouldn't—" "Oh, I would," I interrupted. "And I will, unless you help me." "What do you want?" he asked, desperation creeping into his voice. "I want you to break things off with Jenna, completely. Tell her you can't be with someone so unstable, that her mental state is affecting you. Make her feel abandoned, just like she made me feel." John looked conflicted, but the fear of his new affair being exposed won out. "Fine," he muttered. "I'll do it, just leave me out of this mess." Satisfied, I watched as John left the bar, knowing he would follow through. Jenna would soon find herself abandoned by the man she had betrayed me for, adding another layer to her growing despair. The psychological warfare was in full swing. Jenna's paranoia grew, her friends distanced themselves, and now, even John would leave her. The isolation and fear would weigh on her, making her question every decision and every relationship. I knew this phase was harsh, but it was necessary. Jenna needed to understand the depth of her betrayal and feel the consequences in every part of her life. Only then would she truly grasp the pain she had caused me. As I prepared for the next steps, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. The storm was reaching its peak, and Jenna was caught in its center. There was no escape for her now. The time had come to take my revenge to the public stage. Everything had been leading up to this moment. Jenna's career was in ruins, her finances were decimated, and her mental state was fragile. Now, I would make sure everyone knew the truth about her betrayal. I planned a gathering at our home, inviting friends, family, and colleagues. The pretense was a simple dinner party, a chance to catch up and show that life was moving forward. Jenna, eager to reclaim some semblance of normalcy and unaware of my true intentions, agreed to attend. The evening began smoothly, with laughter and casual conversation filling the air. Jenna played her part well, smiling and engaging with everyone, trying to mask her inner turmoil. As the dinner progressed, I noticed the glances and whispers among the guests. The rumors of her affair and subsequent fallout had already begun to spread, but tonight, I would solidify them. After dinner, I stood up to make a toast. The room fell silent, and all eyes turned to me. I raised my glass, forcing a smile. "Thank you all for coming tonight. It's been a challenging time for Jenna and me, but I'm grateful for your support." I turned to Jenna, who looked at me with a mix of confusion and apprehension. "Jenna, I know things have been difficult, and I've tried to be understanding, but there's something I need to share with everyone here." She blanched, her eyes widening in fear. "Mark, please." Ignoring her, I continued. "Jenna has been unfaithful. For the past 3 years, she's been having an affair with John, her colleague. I found out, and it shattered our marriage. I want you all to know the truth." Gasps and murmurs erupted around the room. Jenna's face turned pale, and tears welled up in her eyes. "Mark, stop this," she whispered, her voice shaking. I held up a hand, silencing her. "I have proof," I said, pulling out the dossier. Emails, photos, messages, all of it. I trusted her, and she betrayed me. I handed copies of the dossier to a few key individuals, close friends, family members, and colleagues. They began to flip through the pages, their expressions shifting from shock to disgust. "This is what she did," I continued, my voice steady. "She not only betrayed me but also violated the trust of her colleagues and students. Her actions have consequences, and it's time she faces them. Jenna stood up, her body trembling. "I'm sorry," she sobbed, looking around the room. "I made a mistake. Please, I'm begging you, don't do this." The room was silent, the weight of the revelation hanging heavy in the air. One by one, people began to express their disappointment and anger. Friends who had supported us through thick and thin now looked at Jenna with contempt. "You've hurt so many people, Jenna," Jessica said, her voice cold. "How could you do this?" Even her parents, who had always adored her, seemed to struggle with their emotions. "We raised you better than this," her mother said, tears streaming down her face. The humiliation and shame were palpable. Jenna tried to defend herself, but her words fell on deaf ears. The evidence was irrefutable, and the judgment from those around her was harsh. John, who had been avoiding the fallout, was also present. He stood in the corner looking cornered and desperate. "John," I called out, "care to explain your role in this?" He stammered, unable to meet anyone's eyes. I'm sorry, it was a mistake." "A mistake?" I echoed, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "You preyed on my wife and destroyed our marriage, and now you think a simple apology will fix everything?" The room turned against John as well, his reputation crumbling alongside Jenna's. The anger and disappointment from those around us were tangible, and I knew there was no coming back for them. As the evening wore on, Jenna and John left in disgrace, their lives irrevocably changed. The support I received from friends and family was overwhelming, but it was the look of utter defeat on Jenna's face that stayed with me. The public exposure had been brutal, but necessary. Jenna needed to understand the full extent of her betrayal and face the consequences. The storm had reached its peak, and there was no escaping its fury. As the guests slowly departed, offering their condolences and support, I felt a sense of closure. The truth was out, and justice had been served. Jenna and John would live with the repercussions of their actions, knowing that they had brought this upon themselves. I stood alone in the living room, the silence a stark contrast to the chaos of the evening. The journey had been long and painful, but I had reclaimed my dignity and my life. The storm had passed, leaving behind a sense of calm and resolution. It was time to move forward, leaving the wreckage of the past behind. With Jenna publicly exposed and her world crumbling around her, my attention turned to John. He had played an equal part in the betrayal, and it was time he faced the consequences of his actions as well. His humiliation at the dinner party was only the beginning. I reached out to John under the guise of a truce, suggesting that we meet to discuss a way forward. He agreed, probably out of fear and desperation. We arranged to meet at a secluded park, away from prying eyes. When I arrived, John was already there, pacing. He looked up as I approached, his face a mixture of guilt and apprehension. "Mark," he began, "I want to apologize again for everything. It was a mistake, and I regret it deeply." I nodded, pretending to consider his words. "I'm sure you do, John. But apologies won't fix what you've done. We need to address this head on." He swallowed hard, nodding. "What do you want from me?" "First," I said, pulling out a folder, "I want you to sign this confession. It outlines everything: your affair with Jenna, your manipulation, and the impact it had on our lives." John's eyes widened as he read through the document. "You can't be serious," he muttered. "This will ruin me." "You've already ruined yourself, John," I replied coldly. "This is just making it official. Sign it, and we can move on. Refuse, and I'll make sure everyone knows you're a serial cheater who preys on vulnerable women." He hesitated, his hands trembling as he held the pen. After a long moment, he sighed and signed the confession, handing it back to me. "There. Are you happy now?" "Not quite," I said, slipping the document into my bag. "Next, you're going to resign from your job. Today. If you don't, I'll send copies of this confession to your boss, your colleagues, and your new girlfriend." John's face turned pale. "You can't do that. I need this job." "You should have thought about that before you decided to destroy my marriage," I said, my voice devoid of sympathy. "Resign, John. It's the least you can do." Defeated, he nodded. "Fine, I'll do it." "Good," I replied. "And one more thing. You're going to leave this town. Start fresh somewhere else. If I hear that you're still here in a week, I'll make sure everyone knows who you are." He looked at me, his eyes filled with anger and resentment, but he knew he had no other choice. "I'll leave," he muttered. "But you're a cruel man, Mark. You're just as bad as me." I laughed bitterly. Maybe I am, John, but at least I'm doing this for justice. You did it out of selfishness and lust. With that, I turned and walked away, leaving John to contemplate his ruined life. The confrontation had been necessary, a final step in ensuring he paid for his actions. As I walked back to my car, I felt a sense of grim satisfaction. John would never forget this lesson, and neither would Jenna. Over the next few days, I monitored John's actions closely. He resigned from his job as promised, and I made sure his new girlfriend received an anonymous tip about his confession. True to my word, John left town, disappearing from our lives for good. The weight of their betrayal had been heavy, but now, with both Jenna and John facing the consequences, I felt a sense of closure. The confrontation had been the final nail in the coffin of their deceitful relationship. As I stood on my porch watching the sunset, I knew the storm was finally subsiding. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I was ready to face it with a clear mind and a resolute heart. Jenna and John had underestimated me, and now they were paying the price. It was time to rebuild, to move forward, and to find peace in the aftermath of the chaos they had brought into my life. The confrontation with John had been the final chapter in my quest for justice, and now I could begin to heal. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a wake of destruction that Jenna and John could not escape. With both of them out of my life, I faced the daunting task of rebuilding. The house, once filled with memories of love and betrayal, now felt empty and silent. But it was my sanctuary, and I was determined to make it my own again. The first step in moving forward was reclaiming my space. I began by redecorating the house, removing any traces of Jenna's presence. The bedroom was the first to be transformed. I tore down the old wallpaper, repainted the walls a soothing shade of blue, and bought new furniture. Each stroke of paint, each piece of new furniture, symbolized a fresh start. As I worked on the house, I reflected on the events of the past months. The journey had been painful, filled with anger, betrayal, and revenge. But it had also been necessary. Jenna and John had torn apart my life, and I had responded with the same ruthlessness. Now, it was time to focus on healing. I reconnected with old friends and family, those who had stood by me through the ordeal. Their support was invaluable, helping me to see that there was still a future beyond the pain. We spent evenings reminiscing, sharing stories and laughter, slowly rebuilding the bonds that had been strained by the events. One evening, as I sat on the porch with my best friend Tom, he looked at me thoughtfully. "Mark, you've been through hell and back, but you're stronger now. What's next for you?" I took a deep breath, considering his question. "I don't know, Tom. I need to figure out what makes me happy again. Maybe I'll travel, or take up a new hobby. I just need to find myself." He nodded, clinking his beer bottle against mine. "You'll get there, man. Just take it one day at a time." The idea of traveling appealed to me. I had always dreamed of exploring new places, but had put it off due to work and my marriage. Now, with nothing holding me back, I decided it was time to see the world. I started planning a trip to Europe, a journey that would allow me to step away from everything and gain a new perspective. Before leaving, I made one final visit to the lawyer's office. Jennifer Reed greeted me with a smile. "Mark, it's good to see you. How are you holding up?" "Better," I replied. "I wanted to thank you for everything. You've been a rock through this process." She nodded, her expression warm. "You've come a long way, Mark. If you ever need anything, don't hesitate to reach out." With the legal battles behind me and my life slowly coming back together, I boarded a plane to Europe. The trip was everything I needed and more. I wandered through the streets of Paris, hiked the mountains of Switzerland, and soaked in the culture of Italy. Each new experience helped me to heal, to let go of the past, and to embrace the future. As the weeks turned into months, I felt a sense of renewal. The pain of Jenna's betrayal was still there, but it no longer defined me. I had found a way to move forward, to reclaim my life on my terms. Upon returning home, I knew it was time to start fresh. I began volunteering at a local community center, using my experience to help others going through difficult times. It was fulfilling work, reminding me that I wasn't alone in my struggles and that I could make a difference. One evening, while volunteering, I met Emily, a kind-hearted woman with a warm smile. We bonded over our shared experiences, and slowly, a friendship blossomed into something more. Emily was patient and understanding, giving me the space I needed to heal while offering her support. Our relationship grew, and with it, my hope for the future. Emily showed me that it was possible to love again, to trust again. She became a beacon of light in the darkness, guiding me towards a brighter tomorrow. As I stood on my porch, watching another sunset, I realized how far I had come. The journey had been arduous, but I had emerged stronger and more resilient. Jenna and John were a distant memory, a chapter of my life that had taught me valuable lessons about strength, justice, and the power of moving forward. The aftermath of the storm had given way to a new beginning. With Emily by my side and a renewed sense of purpose, I was ready to face whatever the future held. The past no longer held power over me. I had reclaimed my life, and I was finally at peace. Life had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Emily and I continued to grow closer, and my days were filled with fulfilling work and new adventures. I had come to terms with the past, or so I thought. But life has a way of throwing curveballs when you least expect them. One crisp autumn afternoon, I decided to visit a local coffee shop that had recently opened downtown. I walked in, enjoying the aroma of freshly brewed coffee and the soft chatter of patrons. As I waited in line, I glanced around, taking in the cozy ambiance. That's when I saw her. Jenna was sitting at a corner table, her head bowed over a book. She looked different, more subdued, as if the weight of the past months had taken a toll on her. My heart skipped a beat, a mix of anger, sadness, and unexpected pity washing over me. I debated leaving, but something compelled me to stay. I ordered my coffee and after a moment's hesitation, walked over to her table. "Jenna," I said softly. She looked up, her eyes widening in surprise. "Mark, I didn't expect to see you here." "I didn't either," I admitted, pulling out a chair and sitting down. There was an awkward silence as we both tried to find the right words. "How have you been?" she finally asked, her voice tentative. "Better," I replied honestly. "A lot has changed. I've been traveling, volunteering, and I met someone new." A flicker of pain crossed her face, but she nodded. "I'm glad to hear that, Mark. You deserve happiness." "And you?" I asked, more out of politeness than genuine curiosity. "It's been hard," she admitted. "After everything, I moved back in with my parents. I've been trying to rebuild my life, find a new job, and deal with the consequences of my actions." There was a vulnerability in her voice that I hadn't heard before. Despite everything, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. "Jenna, I never wanted things to turn out this way, but your actions left me no choice." "I know," she whispered, tears welling up in her eyes. "I made so many mistakes, and I've paid for them every day since." We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our shared history pressing down on us. Finally, I took a deep breath. "Jenna, I've moved on, and I've found peace. I hope you can do the same." She looked at me, her eyes filled with regret. "Thank you, Mark. That means more than you know." As I stood to leave, she reached out and gently touched my hand. "I'm truly sorry, Mark, for everything." I nodded, offering her a small, genuine smile. "I know, Jenna. Take care of yourself." With that, I walked out of the coffee shop, feeling a strange sense of closure. The encounter had been unexpected, but it had given me a chance to finally let go of the last remnants of bitterness and anger. That evening, I told Emily about my meeting with Jenna. She listened quietly, her hand resting on mine. "How do you feel about it?" she asked softly. "Lighter," I admitted. "Like a weight has been lifted. I never thought I'd see her again, but now that I have, I realize it was what I needed to finally move on completely." Emily smiled, her eyes filled with understanding and warmth. "I'm glad, Mark. You deserve to be free from the past." As we sat together, I felt a profound sense of peace. The unexpected reunion with Jenna had been the final step in my journey towards healing. I had faced my past, found love again, and reclaimed my life. The future was bright, filled with endless possibilities. With Emily by my side and the lessons I had learned along the way, I knew I could face anything. The past was behind me, and I was ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. The storm had passed, and in its wake, I had found strength, resilience, and a renewed sense of hope. Life, with all its unexpected twists and turns, was a journey I was now ready to face with an open heart and a clear mind. With the unexpected reunion with Jenna behind me, my life felt more settled than ever. Emily and I grew closer, and our bond was strengthened by the understanding and support we offered each other. We both carried scars from our pasts, but together, we found healing and hope. One evening, Emily and I decided to take a walk through the park where I had confronted John months before. The autumn leaves crunched beneath our feet as we strolled hand in hand, the crisp air filled with the scent of pine and earth. "Mark, have you ever thought about what's next for us?" Emily asked, her eyes sparkling in the golden light of the setting sun. I smiled, squeezing her hand gently. "I think about it all the time, Emily. You've brought so much joy and stability into my life. I can't imagine my future without you." She stopped walking and turned to face me, her expression serious but filled with love. "I feel the same way, Mark. I want us to build a life together, to create new memories that overshadow the pain of our pasts." Her words touched me deeply. I had spent so much time focused on healing and revenge that I hadn't allowed myself to fully embrace the possibility of a joyful future. Emily's love had been a beacon, guiding me towards a new beginning. "I want that too, Emily," I said, my voice filled with emotion. "I want to build a life with you." At that moment, I realized that I was ready to take the next step. Reaching into my coat pocket, I pulled out a small velvet box and dropped to one knee. Emily gasped, her eyes widening in surprise and joy. "Emily, you've shown me what it means to truly heal and love again. You've been my rock, my confidant, and my best friend. Will you marry me and continue this journey together?" Tears filled her eyes as she nodded, a radiant smile spreading across her face. "Yes, Mark, 1,000 times yes." I slipped the ring onto her finger, and we embraced, the world around us fading away. At that moment, everything felt right. We had both endured so much, and now, we had found each other, a new beginning full of promise and love. The months that followed were filled with wedding preparations and dreams for the future. We decided on a small, intimate ceremony, surrounded by close friends and family who had supported us through thick and thin. The day of the wedding was perfect. Emily looked stunning in her simple, elegant dress, and as she walked down the aisle towards me, I felt a wave of gratitude and love wash over me. Our vows were heartfelt, reflecting the journey we had taken to find each other and the commitment we made to build a future together. After the ceremony, we celebrated with our loved ones, the atmosphere filled with joy and laughter. Tom, my best friend, gave a heartfelt speech, toasting new beginnings and the power of love and resilience. As the evening drew to a close, Emily and I danced under the stars, the soft music enveloping us. "I love you, Mark," she whispered, her head resting on my shoulder. "I love you too, Emily," I replied, holding her close. This is just the beginning of our story. Our honeymoon took us to the beautiful beaches of Hawaii, where we spent our days exploring the island and our nights dreaming about the future. We talked about starting a family, buying a home, and continuing our volunteer work together. Returning home, we settled into our new life with a sense of peace and fulfillment. The house that had once been a symbol of pain and betrayal was now filled with love and laughter. We redecorated together, creating a space that reflected our shared tastes and dreams. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, Emily turned to me with a smile. "You know, Mark, I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" I asked, curious. "I want to start a family," she said, her eyes filled with hope. "I think we're ready." My heart swelled with joy at her words. "I think we are too, Emily. I can't wait to see what the future holds for us." As we sat together, dreaming about the life we would build, I realized how far I had come. The journey had been long and filled with challenges, but it had led me to this moment of pure happiness and love. The past was a distant memory, a chapter that had shaped me but no longer defined me. With Emily by my side, I was ready to embrace the future and all the possibilities it held. Our story was just beginning, and I knew that together we could face anything. The storm had passed, leaving behind a clear, bright horizon. It was a new beginning, and I was ready to embrace it with an open heart and a hopeful spirit. The decision to start a family brought a renewed sense of purpose and excitement to our lives. Emily and I threw ourselves into preparing for this new chapter, making plans and setting goals that would shape our future together. We began by searching for a new home, a place where we could build our family and create lasting memories. After weeks of visiting different neighborhoods and exploring various houses, we found the perfect one, a charming two-story house with a spacious backyard and a cozy interior. It felt like the perfect place to start our journey as a family. Moving into our new home was a labor of love. Emily and I spent countless hours painting, decorating, and arranging furniture. Each room was a canvas for our dreams, and we filled it with warmth and love. The house quickly became a reflection of our personalities and our hopes for the future. One evening, as we sat on the porch of our new home, Emily turned to me with a radiant smile. "Mark, this feels like a dream. I can't believe how far we've come." I took her hand in mine, feeling a deep sense of gratitude. "It is a dream, Emily, and we're just getting started. This is only the beginning of our journey together." As the months passed, we continued to build our life together. Emily and I both found fulfillment in our work and volunteer activities. We supported each other's passions and dreams, creating a balanced and harmonious partnership. Our discussions about starting a family became more frequent and detailed. We talked about the kind of parents we wanted to be, the values we wanted to instill in our children, and the adventures we hoped to share with them. These conversations brought us even closer, solidifying our commitment to each other and to the family we were planning to create. Then, one bright spring morning, Emily surprised me with news that would change our lives forever. She handed me a small, beautifully wrapped box. "Open it," she said, her eyes sparkling with excitement. I carefully unwrapped the box and found a tiny pair of baby shoes inside. My heart skipped a beat as I looked up at Emily, who was smiling through happy tears. "We're going to have a baby," she whispered. Tears of joy filled my eyes as I embraced her. "Emily, this is amazing. I can't believe it. We're going to be parents." The months that followed were a whirlwind of preparations and anticipation. We turned one of the bedrooms into a nursery, painting the walls a soft, soothing color and filling it with baby furniture and decorations. Friends and family showered us with love and support, celebrating this new chapter in our lives. Throughout Emily's pregnancy, I was by her side every step of the way. We attended prenatal classes, read parenting books, and took long walks together, dreaming about the future. Each day brought us closer to the moment we would meet our child, and the excitement grew with each passing week. Finally, on a beautiful summer day, our baby boy was born. Holding him in my arms for the first time was a moment of pure, indescribable joy. He was perfect, a symbol of our love and the beginning of a new chapter in our lives. We named him Ethan, a name that represented strength and hope. As we brought him home, the house that we had filled with love and dreams now echoed with the sounds of our new family. Sleepless nights and endless diaper changes became our new reality, but every moment was filled with love and gratitude. Watching Emily with Ethan filled my heart with pride and happiness. She was a natural mother, nurturing and loving, and seeing them together made me realize how truly blessed I was. Our little family was everything I had ever hoped for and more. As the years passed, we continued to grow and evolve as a family. We celebrated Ethan's first steps, his first words, and every milestone along the way. Our home was filled with laughter, love, and the joyful chaos of family life. Emily and I made a conscious effort to nurture our relationship amidst the busyness of parenthood. We planned regular date nights, took weekend trips, and made time for each other, ensuring that our bond remained strong and vibrant. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching Ethan play in the yard, Emily leaned her head on my shoulder. "Mark, this is everything I ever dreamed of. Our family, our home. It's perfect." I wrapped my arm around her, feeling a deep sense of contentment. "It is perfect, Emily, and it's all because of you. You've brought so much joy and love into my life." She smiled, her eyes filled with love. "We did this together, Mark, and I can't wait to see what the future holds for us and Ethan." As we watched the sunset, I realized that our journey was far from over. There would be challenges and triumphs, joys and sorrows, but we would face them together, as a family. The past was behind us, and the future was a blank canvas, waiting for us to paint it with the colors of our dreams. Our new beginning was not just a moment in time, but a continuous journey of love, growth, and hope. With Emily and Ethan by my side, I knew that anything was possible. We had built a life filled with purpose and joy, and I was excited to see where the road would take us next. Life was moving forward in ways I had never imagined. Our son Ethan was growing, filling our days with laughter and new adventures, Emily and I were more in love than ever, our bond strengthened by the trials we had overcome and the joy we shared. But as often happens, just when you think the past is firmly behind you, it finds a way to resurface. It was a quiet Saturday morning when I received a phone call from an unknown number. I hesitated before answering, but curiosity got the better of me. "Hello, Mark speaking?" "Mark, it's John," the voice on the other end said, sending a chill down my spine. "We need to talk." I hadn't heard from John since our last confrontation, and hearing his voice now brought back a flood of emotions. "What do you want, John?" I asked, my voice cold. "It's about Jenna," he said, sounding desperate. "She's not doing well. Can we meet?" I was taken aback. Jenna was a chapter I had closed, a past I had moved beyond, but something in John's voice made me agree. We arranged to meet at the same park where we had confronted each other months before. When I arrived, John was already there, looking worn and haggard. He had been through his struggles since our last encounter. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, his voice weary. "Get to the point, John," I replied, not wanting to prolong the conversation. "It's Jenna. She's been spiraling ever since everything came out. She's lost her job, her friends, everything. I tried to help her, but she won't listen to me," he explained, his eyes pleading. "She's been talking about you a lot, saying she needs closure." I felt a mix of anger and pity. Jenna had brought this on herself, but part of me still remembered the woman I had loved. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "She wants to see you, Mark, just one last time. Maybe it will give her the closure she needs to move on," he said. I hesitated, thinking about everything that had happened. Could I face her again? But maybe this was the final step in putting the past to rest. "Fine," I said finally. "I'll meet her, but this is the last time." We arranged to meet at a small cafe the next day. When I walked in, Jenna was already there, looking fragile and worn. She seemed a shadow of her former self, the weight of her actions taking a toll. "Mark," she said softly, looking up as I approached, "thank you for coming." I sat down, unsure of what to say. "Jenna," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. She took a deep breath, tears welling up in her eyes. "I've thought a lot about everything that happened. I know I can't undo the past, but I need you to know how truly sorry I am." Her words hung in the air, heavy with regret. I felt a surge of conflicting emotions, anger, sadness, and a strange sense of relief. "Jenna, we both made mistakes," I said finally. "But what's done is done. We have to move on." She nodded, tears streaming down her face. "I know. I've lost so much, Mark. I just needed to say it to your face, to ask for your forgiveness." I looked at her, seeing the pain and regret in her eyes. It was a stark contrast to the confident, deceitful woman who had betrayed me. "I forgive you, Jenna," I said quietly. "But forgiveness doesn't mean things can go back to the way they were. We both need to move forward." She sobbed quietly, nodding. "Thank you, Mark. I wish you all the happiness in the world." As I left the cafe, I felt a strange sense of closure. The final confrontation with Jenna had been difficult, but necessary. It was the last piece of the puzzle, the final step in putting the past behind me. When I got home, Emily was waiting for me, concern etched on her face. "How did it go?" she asked, pulling me into a comforting embrace. "It went well," I said, holding her close. "I think I finally have the closure I needed. Jenna and I have both said what needed to be said. Now we can truly move on." Emily smiled, her eyes filled with understanding and love. "I'm glad, Mark. You deserve peace." As we stood together, I realized how far I had come. The journey had been long and painful, but it had led me to this moment of peace and contentment. With Emily and Ethan by my side, I was ready to face the future with an open heart and a clear mind. The final confrontation with Jenna had brought the closure I needed, allowing me to fully embrace the new life I had built. The past was finally behind me, and the future was filled with endless possibilities. I was ready to move forward, to build a life filled with love, hope, and happiness. With the final confrontation behind me, I felt a profound sense of peace and closure. Jenna was no longer a shadow over my life, and I was free to fully embrace the future with Emily and Ethan. Our lives settled into a comfortable routine, filled with the joy and challenges of raising a family. One sunny afternoon, Emily and I took Ethan to the park. As we watched him play, Emily turned to me with a thoughtful expression. "Mark, there's something I've been thinking about." I smiled, curious. "What is it?" She hesitated for a moment, then took my hand. "I think we should expand our family. Ethan would love a sibling, and I feel like we're in a good place to welcome another child." Her words filled me with warmth and excitement. The idea of growing our family felt right. "I think that's a wonderful idea, Emily. Let's do it." We started planning for the future with renewed enthusiasm, excited at the prospect of welcoming another child into our lives. Our home, once a symbol of pain and betrayal, was now a place of love and hope. As the months passed, we continued to build our lives together. Emily and I both found new professional opportunities that fulfilled us. She took on a leadership role in a local nonprofit organization, where her compassion and dedication made a significant impact. I started my own consulting business, helping small companies navigate the challenges of growth and development. One evening, after putting Ethan to bed, Emily and I sat on the porch, enjoying the quiet night. "Do you ever think about how far we've come?" she asked, her head resting on my shoulder. "All the time," I replied, wrapping my arm around her. "I never imagined my life could be this full and happy after everything that happened, but here we are." She smiled, her eyes reflecting the moonlight. "It's because we faced it all together, Mark. We turned our pain into strength and built something beautiful." As we sat there, the sound of crickets filling the air, I realized how grateful I was for every moment, every challenge, and every victory. Emily and Ethan were my world, and the future looked brighter than ever. A few months later, Emily and I found out we were expecting our second child. The news brought us even closer, and we eagerly prepared for the new addition to our family. Ethan was excited about becoming a big brother, and we involved him in every step of the process, from setting up the nursery to picking out baby clothes. The pregnancy went smoothly, and on a crisp autumn morning, our daughter Lily was born. Holding her in my arms for the first time, I felt an overwhelming sense of love and gratitude. Our family was complete, and I couldn't have been happier. Life with 2 children was hectic but filled with joy. Ethan was a doting big brother, and watching him interact with Lily brought endless smiles to our faces. Emily and I continued to nurture our relationship, making time for each other amidst the chaos of parenthood. As the years passed, our family thrived. We celebrated milestones, from Ethan's first day of school to Lily's first steps, each moment a reminder of how far we had come. Our home was filled with laughter, love, and the joyful chaos of family life. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, Emily raised her glass. "To our family," she said, her eyes shining with happiness. "We've been through so much, but we've come out stronger and more united than ever." We all raised our glasses, even Ethan with his cup of juice, and toasted to the future. "To our family," I echoed, feeling a deep sense of fulfillment. As we enjoyed our meal, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. The pain and betrayal of the past were distant memories, overshadowed by the love and happiness we had built. Emily, Ethan, and Lily were my world, and I was grateful for every moment we shared. Our story was one of resilience, love, and new beginnings. We had faced the storm and emerged stronger, ready to embrace whatever the future held. With my family by my side, I knew that anything was possible. The journey had been long and filled with challenges, but it had led us to a place of peace and fulfillment. The future was bright, and I was ready to embrace it with an open heart and a hopeful spirit. Our new beginning was not just a moment in time, but a continuous journey of love, growth, and hope. With Emily, Ethan, and Lily, I was ready to face the future and build a life filled with endless possibilities.